In a world where kindness is rare, one little girl's life was about to change forever. She was just a child, cleaning the school washroom when everyone else ignored her pain. But that evening, a millionaire walked in, and what he did next shocked everyone. This is not just a story about wealth. It's about compassion, humanity, and the power of one moment that can rewrite an innocent child's future. Stay with us, because this heart-touching story will melt your heart and teach us all a lesson our society desperately needs. The school was silent, wrapped in the kind of stillness that only came after hours, when children's laughter had long faded and the last footsteps of teachers had echoed out the doors. The clock on the hallway wall ticked faintly, marking the slow passage of an evening that should have held nothing unusual. Vincent Watson walked with purpose, his polished shoes tapping against the tiles. He was a man of 34, a millionaire CEO who was used to noise, meetings, and decisions that shaped companies. But here, in this quiet school, his footsteps felt louder than usual, echoing like a stranger's intrusion. The golden sunset filtered through tall windows, painting streaks of light across the walls. Most classrooms were locked, chairs stacked, and the hall smelled faintly of chalk and disinfectant. Vincent expected only silence. A simple walk toward the office where the principal waited to discuss the library donation. Yet halfway down the corridor, something tugged at his senses. A sound, so faint he thought he imagined it. He stopped, his brow furrowed. There it was again, scrubbing, a rag against tiles, and the soft splash of water moving across the floor. Vincent's heart gave a small jolt. At this hour? Impossible. Everyone should have been gone. Schools did not echo with cleaning sounds from tiny hands after dark, and yet the noise persisted, steady, desperate. Slowly, cautiously, Vincent followed the sound. Each step was measured, his tall frame tense as if he were walking into a mystery he couldn't yet name. The noise grew clearer as he neared the bathroom door. He placed his hand against the door frame, hesitated, then pushed it open with quiet care. What he saw made him freeze. The image seared itself into his mind like a wound. A little girl, kneeling on the cold bathroom tiles, her small knees pressed hard against the floor. Her golden hair slipped into her face as she bent forward, gripping a rag that was too large for her delicate fingers. Her little arms moved with weary determination, scrubbing at the stained floor as though her entire world depended on it. The bucket of water beside her was murky, her dress clinging to her from damp splashes. Her dress was faded, thin, not the kind of clothing fit for evening chill. Her shoes, scuffed and too small, looked like they had endured more years than her young life. She didn't see him at first. Her whole focus was on the floor, as though finishing that task was more important than breathing. Her body trembled with exhaustion, yet she kept going. Vincent's chest tightened painfully. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. "What on earth," he whispered under his breath, his voice rough, "is a child doing here?" His breath caught, and for the first time in years, Vincent felt powerless. Not in a boardroom, not in business, but in front of a sight that made his soul ache. The sound of the door creaking startled her. The rag slipped from her small hands as she whipped her head up. Her wide, ocean-blue eyes locked onto Vincent's tall figure, and in that instant, pure fear flashed across her face. She jumped up too quickly, nearly stumbling. Her tiny frame seemed even smaller compared to his towering presence. The rag lay forgotten on the wet floor as her trembling hands clutched the hem of her faded dress. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, her voice breaking, fragile like glass. "I'm not finished yet. Please don't tell anyone. I'll get in trouble." The words hit Vincent like knives. Trouble? For what, cleaning a bathroom floor? He stepped forward slowly, lowering his voice into the gentlest tone he could manage. "Trouble?" he repeated softly. "Little one, why are you here cleaning? This isn't where you belong. Not now. Not at this hour." Her lips quivered, her eyes darting down as if afraid to meet his gaze. Her small fingers twisted the fabric of her dress until her knuckles turned white. Finally, in a whisper that seemed too heavy for a child to carry, she answered, "My stepmother. She makes me come. She says if I don't clean, I don't get dinner." Vincent felt his heart twist painfully inside his chest. The words struck deeper than any business loss, deeper than any betrayal he had ever faced. This was a child, a little girl forced to choose between hunger and hard labor. He crouched down slowly, carefully, so his eyes were level with hers. "What's your name?" he asked softly, though his throat was tight. She hesitated, her lashes wet with unshed tears. "Juliana," she whispered at last. "Juliana Selah." 7. Just 7 years old. Vincent's mind reeled. 7-year-olds should be running through playgrounds, drawing with crayons, learning songs, not scrubbing floors at night. "Juliana," Vincent murmured, tasting the name like a fragile treasure. A child belongs in class, in laughter, in stories, not here on her knees with a rag. Her lip trembled violently, her breath shaky. "But She looked down, ashamed, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to make her angry. Please don't tell her, please." The plea cut straight into his soul. She wasn't just afraid of punishment. She had learned to live in fear, her innocence tangled in silent pain. Vincent swallowed hard, his throat thick with emotions he couldn't name. For the first time in years, the powerful CEO who commanded entire corporations, who could crush competitors with a single decision, felt utterly helpless. Not in front of a rival, not in front of the world, but in front of a fragile little girl whose blue eyes carried more sorrow than any child should ever bear. The bathroom smelled of bleach, sharp and bitter, stinging Vincent's nose the moment he stepped in. But that wasn't what gripped his heart. No, the sight before him did. Juliana's small body was crouched on the cold, tiled floor. Her tiny hands, no bigger than fragile birds, were raw and red, clinging to a rag soaked in harsh chemicals. She moved like a machine, silent, desperate, as though her life depended on how well she scrubbed. Vincent froze in the doorway. This wasn't the life a child should live. Not her, not anyone. His chest tightened painfully as he crouched down beside her. "Juliana," he whispered, his voice shaking. She didn't look up. Her arm moved faster, trembling, as though she could erase the dirt and her fear with every furious motion. Quietly, Vincent reached out. He gently wrapped his strong, warm hand around the rag and tugged it from her fragile fingers. Her head shot up, wide, frightened eyes met his. They were eyes that had seen too much pain, too much cruelty. "No more, Juliana," he said firmly. "Not tonight, not ever again." Her lips trembled. Her voice was so small it almost disappeared. "But if I stop, she'll—" Juliana's throat tightened. "She'll hurt me." Vincent's chest burned. He had heard of cruelty. He had read about it. But seeing it, etched into this child's face, was unbearable. His voice softened, breaking in the middle. "No, sweetheart. I won't let that happen. You're not alone anymore. Do you hear me? Not anymore." Tears welled in her wide eyes. They clung to her lashes, refusing to fall, as though she wasn't sure if she was allowed to cry. She stared at him, her breath uneven, as if torn between hope and fear. "Promise?" she whispered finally, the word so fragile it nearly shattered him. For a moment, Vincent couldn't speak. His throat locked, his heart pounding with a weight heavier than any deal he had ever made in his life. This wasn't business. This wasn't power. This was something far greater. Vincent, the billionaire who had once believed nothing could shake him, suddenly felt tears press behind his eyes. He leaned closer, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I promise, Juliana. You will never kneel on a bathroom floor again. Not as long as I live." Her lips parted. She searched his face as if she wanted to find a crack in his words, a reason to doubt him. She had been given false promises before, ones that ended in pain. But there was something different in his eyes, something unshakable. Slowly, Juliana's shoulders shook. A sob broke free, then another. She collapsed forward, and Vincent caught her, holding her against his chest. Her small body trembled like a leaf in a storm, and he wrapped his arms around her tighter, shielding her as if the whole world might try to take her away. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair. "You're safe. I swear it on my life, you're safe with me." Her tears soaked his shirt, but he didn't care. He had never cared less about anything material in his entire life. All that mattered was the little girl in his arms. He had built empires, fought ruthless battles in boardrooms, and signed billion-dollar contracts. Yet none of those victories meant anything compared to this moment, holding a broken child who was finally learning what it meant to be protected. The rag slipped from his hand and landed with a soft thud on the wet floor. Vincent looked at it one last time, his jaw tightening. That rag, that floor, that cruel life. It was all behind her now. From this night forward, Juliana's life would change, and so would his. Because in that promise, in that whisper in the dark, Vincent had found something he never knew he was searching for. A reason to fight, not for power, not for money, but for love, for family, for her. And he would never, ever let go of that promise. That night, Vincent tossed and turned in his massive bedroom, but no comfort of silk sheets or luxury pillows could bring him peace. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Juliana's tiny frame kneeling on the cold bathroom tiles, her little hands trembling as she scrubbed. The rag had looked bigger than her palms, and the bleach had burned her skin raw, leaving faint red marks. He sat up, rubbing his face with both hands, frustration and anger clawing at his chest. He was a man who had negotiated with sharks in boardrooms, faced rivals who would stab him in the back for a deal, yet none of that compared to the pain of watching a child suffer. This was not just injustice, it was cruelty. The next morning he called his assistant. His voice was calm but sharp, leaving no room for hesitation. "I want everything about Juliana, her home life, her guardians, her school. Leave no stone unturned." The assistant nodded, used to Vincent's demanding nature, but this time noticed something different in his tone, something personal. Days passed, though each one felt like a lifetime to Vincent. At last, a thick file landed on his mahogany desk. He opened it with trembling hands, dreading what he would find, yet knowing he had to see the truth. As he read, his heart grew heavier with every line. Juliana's father had died 2 years ago in an accident that no one had seen coming. The girl's world had shattered overnight, and instead of being comforted, she had been handed over to a woman who wore the title of stepmother, but lacked even a shred of compassion. From that day forward, Juliana's life had been stripped of joy. Instead of bedtime stories, she was handed brooms and rags. Instead of hugs, she was met with harsh punishments and cold silence. Her school file painted another picture. A quiet student, never disruptive, never loud, never complaining. Teachers had assumed she was shy, maybe withdrawn, but no one knew that behind her silence was a storm of fear and loneliness. Vincent closed the file, his jaw tightening. He could see her in his mind, those wide eyes that had begged for reassurance, the whisper of promise that had nearly broken him. It wasn't just paperwork anymore, it was a cry for help. His fists clenched against the desk until his knuckles turned white. He had fought many battles in his life, but this wasn't about money, mergers, or stock shares. This was about dignity, about a child's right to be loved, not broken. No child should suffer this, Vincent muttered to the empty room, his voice low but filled with steel. Not while I can stop it. His reflection in the glass wall of his office looked back at him, powerful, wealthy, feared by many. But for the first time in years, Vincent didn't see a tycoon. He saw a man with a mission, and this mission was Juliana. The following week arrived with an unusual weight in Vincent's chest. His calendar was packed with meetings worth millions, contracts that could change markets, and phone calls that demanded his commanding voice. Yet, none of them mattered. For the first time in his life, he ignored the flashing red reminders on his phone and instead circled one moment on his schedule: Juliana. He walked through the school gates not as the powerful CEO everyone bowed to, not as the man whose signature carried the weight of entire industries. No. Today he walked as a man who had discovered a purpose deeper than success. He came with a heart trembling, burdened with the image of a fragile little girl whose quiet suffering had pierced through the iron walls around his soul. Juliana stood in the hallway, clutching her worn-out backpack as though it carried her whole world. Her shoes were scuffed, her dress faded from too many washes, yet her small face carried a soft resilience that humbled him. When her eyes spotted Vincent, her lips curved into a weak, almost unsure smile. That smile, it undid him. A millionaire who could conquer corporate jungles, who could silence boardrooms with one command, now found his knees weaken at the sight of a child's fragile courage. He walked toward her, his heart pounding. And then he did something he had not done in years. He knelt. He brought himself to her level, lowering his powerful presence into the fragile world of a child. His voice was not commanding like in the boardroom, but tender, gentle, almost trembling. "Juliana," he whispered, as though the world itself should hush to hear this moment. "Would you like to live where you're safe? Where no one forces you to scrub floors anymore? A place where you're loved?" For a second, the hallway seemed to freeze. Her small fingers gripped the straps of her bag tighter, her big eyes staring into his as if searching for the truth hidden inside his words. Her little lips quivered. "You mean a real home?" Vincent felt something break inside him. A home, something so simple, so basic, was for her a distant dream. He swallowed hard, his throat tight, his voice breaking despite his effort to stay calm. "Yes," he whispered, his chest aching. "A real home. With books you can read at night. Toys that belong only to you, warm meals waiting for you at the table. And someone who cares for you every single day, not just sometimes, not only when it's convenient, but every single day." Her lashes blinked fast, as though her little heart couldn't believe such words could exist. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, her eyes filled with tears, those heavy tears that children often hold back because the world has already taught them to be strong. And then it happened. She dropped her bag and ran into him. Her small arms, frail but desperate, wrapped around his neck as though he was the only anchor left in her stormy sea. Vincent froze at first, startled by the force of her embrace. But then, as her tears soaked into his expensive suit, something melted inside him. His arms rose, trembling, and he held her close enough to feel her small heartbeat thudding against his chest. He had held diamonds, contracts, and trophies of victory in his hands, but never had he held something as priceless as this, a child's trust. In that hallway, surrounded by the faint chatter of other children and the echo of footsteps, Vincent discovered something that no empire had ever given him. For the first time in years, he felt something greater than success, more powerful than wealth, more lasting than fame. He felt love. The days passed like golden threads, weaving a new life. Vincent's mansion, once a hollow palace of glass and steel, began to breathe. The silence that used to weigh heavy on his chest was gone. Now, laughter echoed through the marble halls, bouncing off every corner like music. Juliana's little footsteps ran across the polished floors, filling the house with life. Her giggles replaced the ticking of the expensive clock that once kept him company during long, lonely nights. Her crayons lay scattered on his mahogany desk, bold lines and colorful drawings covering the papers where stock numbers used to dominate. Vincent often found himself stopping in the middle of meetings just to glance at the childish pictures taped on the wall behind him. A messy rainbow, a smiling sun, and one drawing of a tall man holding the hand of a little girl with bright eyes, labeled in shaky handwriting, "Me and Vincent." Every time his eyes landed on it, his throat tightened. For years he thought success was measured by charts, contracts, and dollar signs. Now success looked like a child's scribbled picture on his office wall. At dinner, Juliana would chatter endlessly, telling him about her day at school, how she answered a question correctly, how a teacher praised her handwriting, how she shared her lunch with a friend. Vincent, a man who once ate in silence at long tables, now leaned forward, listening as if every word she spoke was worth more than gold. At night, she insisted he sit beside her bed and listen as she read to him. Her tiny finger traced the words, her voice stumbling and rising with effort, but filled with determination. Vincent would smile, realizing he had spent his life closing billion-dollar deals, but nothing compared to the pride he felt when Juliana finished reading a page without stopping. One evening, the sky outside blushed with the colors of sunset. The air inside the mansion was warm, carrying the smell of hot cocoa Juliana had begged the cook to make. As Vincent tucked her under the soft blankets, her eyes shimmered in the dim light. She reached out, her little hand holding his wrist. Her voice dropped to a whisper, fragile, but filled with a weight far beyond her years. "Thank you, Vincent, for seeing me when nobody else did." The words pierced his heart like a soft arrow, shattering walls he didn't know he still had. Tears stung his eyes, unexpected and raw. His lips trembled as he bent down, brushing a kiss against her small forehead. "No, Juliana," he whispered back, his voice breaking with emotion. "Thank you for teaching me what really matters." The child smiled, her eyes fluttering closed, her breathing softening into sleep. Vincent sat there for a long while watching her, feeling something he had never truly known, peace. In that stillness, the truth rose in his heart, like the morning sun. Money could build towers, money could build empires, but money alone could never build a life. It was love, the messy, uncalculated, priceless gift of love that turned empty walls into a home and a broken man into a father. That night, Vincent realized his greatest investment wasn't in stocks, properties, or businesses. It was in a little girl who taught him that love was the only true wealth worth keeping. And with Juliana's soft breathing filling the room, he finally felt like the richest man alive.